Jihad Watch every week with Robert Spencer. I've said this before and I'll say it again. If there is peace between Muslims and non-Muslims and everyone gets along and there's no more beheadings, murders, suicide bombings, oppression, all that sort of thing, censorship, then this segment of the show will disappear completely. Until then, it'll carry on. I think it's going to carry on. Robert Spencer, always a pleasure. How are you?
Just great, Michael. How are you?
I'm pretty well now. Let's talk about Detroit. Both of us spend a bit of time in Michigan. We don't, maybe not Detroit so much, but we do go down there. I was in Dearborn with you at one point, Dearborn, Michigan, where the Islamic community want to arrest all sorts of people for speaking out against Islam in any way at all. This is fascinating, though. This is about well, an atheist ad that went up, and perfect right. You know, atheists have a perfect right to don't believe in God. You're not alone. Absolutely fine, as long as other people are allowed to respond. But there seemed to be a bit of a double standard here. This one here, don't believe in Muhammad, is on the screen. You are not alone. thetruthaboutmuhammad.com. Did that actually go up on billboards?
No, it was refused. It was an idea of my colleague and our mutual friend Pamela Geller, who saw the atheist ads and wanted to test the parameters of the freedom of speech in Detroit, because we earlier tried to place an ad offering help to people who were considering leaving Islam and were under threat because of Islam's death penalty for apostates. And since that ad was refused, and then we won a free speech case about it, but then Detroit Smart Transit appealed, and we lost the appeal, and we're still fighting that. She wanted to test how willing Detroit was going to be in terms of free speech in accommodating an ad that was critical of Muhammad. Now, they ran the atheist ad, no problem, and they said, well, it's free speech, and so we have to do it. But they rejected our ad, obviously, because they are afraid of violent response from Muslims in Detroit and are thus submitting and kowtowing to violent intimidation, or just because it's not permissible in Sharia Detroit nowadays to criticize Muhammad.
Now, causing offense should not be any sort of criteria. I'm offended by all sorts of things. I'm also a grown-up and a Democrat, and I believe we have to tolerate this sort of thing. There are some mega churches in Detroit, Greater Detroit, and parts of Michigan, huge, for example, black Christian community, a lot of black evangelicals and Pentecostals, who will be offended by don't believe in God. But okay, they're offended, big deal. But it still went up. It's still a small minority Muslim community in Michigan, but just because they apparently might be offended, and there was no evidence that they would be, I'm sure they would have been, but the possibility they would be, and the ad wasn't accepted.
Well, yeah, and this is the other thing about it also that I have to say, is that they probably would have been offended. They probably would have complained and whined and protested, if not reacted with violence. But Michael, if you go to thetruthaboutmuhammad.com, it's an extract from my book of the same name, The Truth About Muhammad. It is simply biographical material about Muhammad that is from the earliest Muslim sources. And so they'd be taking offense about things that are in their own canonical texts about Muhammad. And that is the weird thing about this, is that there seems to be a very great unwillingness on the part of Muslims for them to, for non-Muslims to know what is actually taught about Muhammad in their own texts.
All right. Let's talk about Salman Rushdie. I've known Salman for many years. In fact, my second book, he was one of the chapters. We did a TV show about him. This is before Satanic Verses. A very erudite, sophisticated man, a genuinely liberal man. He does believe in intolerance and freedom of speech. Now, there's still a fatwa, sort of, but he travels widely. But this was in India, and the speech was cancelled because there was a fear of an Islamic attack?
Yes, and he was supposed to speak in Calcutta, and it was cancelled at the request of the police. And that's what's really amazing about this story, Michael, is that the police in countries that supposedly protect the freedom of speech ought to be going out of their way to protect those who are threatened for exercising their freedom of speech. And yet, in this case, the Indian officials actually requested that Rushdie not address the conference that he was scheduled to speak at. And so it's really the same thing that's happening in Detroit. We have officials who are not Muslim lining up to do the bidding of Islamic supremacists and enforcing Sharia upon themselves out of fear or political correctness or some combination of the two.
Right. Now, Let's talk about this at a greater length here, because I do know South Asia, and people need to realize this. I'm a Christian, I'm a Catholic, I'm not a Hindu, but Hinduism predates Islam by the hundreds and hundreds of years. This country was overwhelmingly Hindu. Islamic armies came in and conquered and converted people generally by force. So the northern parts of the country, that is now thought to be Pakistan and other areas, are Muslim. In India itself, which is a pluralistic country, there are more Muslim millionaires in India than there are in Pakistan. There is more freedom to practice different parts of your Islamic faith, Sunni or Shia, whatever, than there is in Pakistan, the Islamic State. At the same time, this has to be reciprocal. You have to tolerate Christians and Hindus and Buddhists and Sikhs. But if India is going to collapse, if a Hindu state is going to collapse in the face of Islamic aggression, we're in big trouble, Robert.
Absolutely, yes. And it's also very important to note that Pakistan had a very substantial Hindu minority at the time of the petition. It was something like 30-something%. And now it's down to 1 or 2%. They have systematically driven the Hindus out of the country, have persecuted them, made them subject to violent attacks. The police don't care. They don't help. And in India, meanwhile, Muslims are a protected class who get these special privileges. And when they make violent threats, like against Rushdie in this case, then the Indian officials rush to give them what they want.
In Pakistan, there is a blasphemy law, and in prison there are, in fact, there are more Muslims than anyone else in prison under the blasphemy law. These are more secular or liberal Muslims, but also Christians and Hindus, the approach. I mean, Christians are given the worst possible jobs. It's appalling. It's an apartheid-like system. I mean, the same people who call Israel absurdly an apartheid state turn a blind eye to the real apartheid, which is applied to non-Orthodox Sunni Muslims in Pakistan. I wish we had more time, Rob. There's always so much to talk about, but believe me, we'll have you back every week as long as I have this show. Thank you, my friend.
Thank you, Michael. Always a pleasure.
Chronicopper is next, and the UN have a great idea about feeding the poor. We're going to tell you more when we come back. It's absolutely fascinating.